This week is National Police Week, and today is Peace Officers Memorial Day, a time to remember those officers who made the ultimate sacrifice protecting and serving the public. Joining me now is Jason Johnson, the president of the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund and the former deputy commissioner of the Baltimore Police Department. Jason, welcome back to Washington Watch. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Now, I think it's pretty straightforward, but explain to our viewers and listeners the purpose of this week focused on law enforcement and this day that recognizes those who made the ultimate sacrifice.
Police Week and the recognition of policing traces its roots back to 1962, which was the very first police week by proclamation of then President John F. Kennedy. And since then, once a year in May, law enforcement officers from around the country and, in fact, from around the world gather in Washington, D.C. With the main purpose of recognizing the service and sacrifice, in particular of those who have given their lives in service to their communities as law enforcement officers. But it also, and it has a deeper meaning as well, in that it's an opportunity for officers to gather and share fellowship and camaraderie and sort of, be as one for one time per year.
Yeah, you can't walk down the street without bumping into a police officer from some particular state or county. So it's always kind of neat to see the guys coming from different places. You know, last time I think we were having a conversation, it was I think it was during the middle of the defund the police effort. Things have changed quite a bit. What's your sense of how law enforcement and the communities across the country are interacting now?
Well, I think there's been a slow and steady improvement in that regard. And when I say that, I really believe firmly, Tony, and I think you do as well, that the problem really never has been the relationship of law enforcement and the community on the ground and where it matters most. The problem has been in recent years more of the sort of the perception that has been peddled about law enforcement officers in certain parts of the media and by certain politicians and other public officials that have promoted the idea that law enforcement is either unnecessary or actually harmful to communities. And I don't think that's ever been the case. But the further away from 2020 we get, I think the better place we are as a profession.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point. It's not the public; it was the politicians. I've even seen that in my hometown of Baton Rouge, recently electing a new mayor, a Republican mayor, and we've already seen an impact on the crime statistics. In that, and I think we're seeing this across the country. When we had this opposition to law enforcement and there was this lawlessness breaking out because of a political ideology, crime was on the uptick. And it looks like now this increased policing is bringing a lower rate of homicides to some of the major cities in the United States.
Yeah, that's absolutely a fact. In fact, my organization, the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, recently published a study of exactly that. And what we looked at in particular was the effect at and after 2020, the Ferguson effect, if you will, depolicing. What is the impact when law enforcement officers are essentially intimidated away from engaging in proactive enforcement? We saw a drop of about 40% overall in the 15 cities that we looked at of proactive enforcement as measured by arrests and stops. And at the same time, we saw an increase of 54% in homicides. So there really is a link between the two. And the reason we know that is not only what I just said, but in the years since, policing the business of policing has returned. And we've seen an increase in about 37% in those measures of policing proactivity. And we've seen a resulting decrease in homicides overall at about 32%. And some cities much better than that, and other cities are a little more flat.
Jason, let me ask you this question. I mean, I stay connected with the law enforcement community, but more locally than I do nationally. I still see that there's some residual to the hostility that we saw from the political class toward law enforcement, and that there's still a deficit of police officers. Many departments still struggling to bring their manpower up to where it needs to be because some people are just rethinking law enforcement as a career.
I think that's the biggest leftover. I think most people in law enforcement, and I'm sure you probably have gathered this from speaking to your friends and former colleagues in law enforcement, that the feelings are getting better. But you're right, the biggest vestige of what we saw in between the mid 2010s and particularly after 2020 is the lack of interest in young people entering the law enforcement profession, which of course we believe is just a byproduct of all the negative messages that are out there about the profession of law enforcement. And that's really the biggest thing I think that we still need to overcome. We need to rebuild the morale within law enforcement. We also need to hold law enforcement up as a calling, as a noble profession that it is.
I agree. I actually have two adult children that are in law enforcement, and they see it as a calling and a way to help, to serve, and protect the community. And I know from in their departments they have manpower issues, but as we rebuild that understanding, that's why I appreciate what you do. And I think weeks like this, where we have Police Week, focusing on the essential nature of law enforcement and the good men and women who are drawn to it and the sacrifices that they made, it will draw others into that profession.
Agreed. And that's as good a reason to have Police Week as any, is to really show the community, the public, that law enforcement serves, that law enforcement, in fact, is a noble profession that still upholds the ideals that I think we hold sacred, and honesty, integrity, service to the community, and all of that stuff that I think is really what has drawn so many people over the decades to this profession. And hopefully we'll return to that very soon.
Absolutely. Jason, always great to talk to you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Anytime. Thanks, Tony.